What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to Cosmic Crucible Live, Episode 4, with the Defense Up King himself, the most funny, most entertaining content creator on YouTube right now. Somebody I really look up to a lot, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But Run
And
7
he couldn't
himself.
make it, so Run 7 showed up instead.
I gave him $20. It was good to go. So obviously, you are now the fourth guest here on our Cosmic Crucible Live. Like we call it a podcast. I don't know what you want to call it. We had Taco Shooter on episode 1, Purple Sticky on 2. Then we had Pathfinder Gaming on 3. And really, we just kind of talk a little bit about like Cosmic Crucible, what's going well, what's not going well, what's, just little different events in the game, looking ahead at the future, and, what are we going to expect? How are we going to see meta shift? So kind of going from there. But this starting out, man, how are you enjoying this season specifically with the Age of X and the change to the global rooms?
Well, I'm liking Age of X, except that I started building Wakanda when they told us they were going to be a great Crucible team. And then they kind of made them irrelevant this season because of the Age of X. The Age of X bonus it's cool, and I like what it's doing with the mutants and everything, and that's fun. I'm looking forward to it to shift to something else. I'm curious what other things that they can come up with too, as far as these room bonuses. But I want to get back to playing with my Wakandans now. I'm not going to be building the War Dogs simply because I can't spare the resources. I'd like to. They look awesome. I want to use them in Crucible just as much as I want to try them out in War and stuff. I do think that Crucible is probably the best part of the game for me right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's just the most enjoyable. Like Purple Sticky and I, for example, like we've been doing this race to masters together forever. And I think we hit it at the almost exact same time, or we're about a week apart. But it's like every time we feel like we get up there, it's like get knocked 2 steps down. And it's just like we've just seen this whole meta transform, week over week to like, Gamma was in room 5 because it made the most sense for bio, but then all of a sudden it shifted to 6 and broke the whole thing. So let's start with Gamma. Like, how are you utilizing Gamma? Are you primarily offense or defense these days?
Gamma's defense for me. Let me take a look here. I've got my defenses in here someplace. Yeah, I've got Gamma in 6, standard setup. I just threw the whole team in there in 6. It's not doing great. It seems like when you change it up, you get a couple of victories the first week, but then word gets out. Like anybody who's at like diamond or above, they're competitive, they're paying attention. And so your new maneuvers only last like 1 or 2 rounds, and that's it. And so Gamma in 6 is now folding big time. I mean, we're seeing there's, screenshots of all kinds of different teams with Red Guardian and Doom that are destroying Gamma in whatever room they're in. Star-Lord and Doom, with your choice of whoever the heavy hitter is that goes on the time platform ride. So Gamma's kind of under control now. For me, it's the tangled web compositions that are catching me off guard. Somebody threw Kingpin in 1 the other day, and it just didn't play out the way I expected it to. And that was my one fail that cost me the whole match because they beat me in points,
Yeah, I agree. We were just talking to Chad about Tangle Web before. It's like, what I'm starting to do with Tangle Web is I'm not using them on defense anymore at all. I'm using them purely on offense because what I found with the mirror match is like, I mean, we know there's counters out there with Infinity Watch, Storm Watch, and all those different things to use that, work, but it takes time. It eats your efficiency. But mirroring the Tangle Web team, I have found has been the most efficient way to beat it, and it's easy. It's actually extremely easy. So like I have one coming up that I'll do after this show is Tangle Web with Eternals. So I was like, oh, that sounds on surface sounds bad, but if I do the mirror correctly, like Noir is a joke. I don't even use Noir anymore. So like I would do 2099 Weaver, Emma Frost, and I'm just going to mirror the Eternals against them because I know I'm going to go first. The question is, can I 2-tap on the first hit with their Noir being a gear 14? If they doesn't, then at least I know theirs are not going to hit me because I'm going to be charged.
Now, Tangled Web with Eternals, is that what you said?
Tangle Web with Eternals on defense, but that I'm going to mirror it with using Emma instead of Noir.
Okay. And so that team, I can see that team being efficient on the mirror and you choosing what to do and everything. Um, I just how efficient is it to use it? Because I've never used the tangled web on offense. I've always just come into it with something.
Yeah, I started
And
doing it. Like, I mean, it was kind of a. I got to give credit to Taco Shooter, right? Like Taco was saying, is like, why are we using Cosmic Crucible based teams on defense when they're meant, they're all offensive based teams. And then when you start thinking about it, it's like, actually, you make a point here. Why am I trying to like risk RNG and lose Infinity Watch? If like, let's say they had Dad Bros and long shot hits the wrong character,
Mhm.
and the fight goes wrong, or Weaver targets Dorm, like it can really change the outcome of the fight. But one thing that is consistent that never happens is me losing the Tangle Web mirror.
Yeah.
And what the way the fight goes, it's pretty simple. It's like, your 2099 will go, their 2099 will go, your Weaver goes first, you go straight at their Weaver, you stun her. And then I use Dorm and Zemo normally on the counter. So I can go
Mhm.
right in with Zemo early and get the ability block on top of that. And then I can stun with Dorm right after that. And she'll die before she ever gets to ult. And then the rest of the team just
Yeah.
dies.
Yeah,
So
if your Weaver's going before theirs, it's a done deal because you're stunning theirs and it's over. Once you control the Weaver in the tangled match,
mhm.
it doesn't matter what you're using. If you can control Weaver, it's over.
Yeah. And I think the idea behind it is like if we can control her on turn one and never have to wait to get the charges burned or wait for the opportune time to get the stun or the ability block, it helps with that efficiency bonus at the end of it. And
Hmm.
that's why I've been using that. And so far it's the least room I worry about going into these fights. You know,
So the trick for Cosmic Crucible is to catch your opponent up on a room where it doesn't play out the way that they expect. They don't have to, like, your teams don't have to hold, but you have to stumble them. They have to two tap a room or two. So we kind of, we know what we're going to use on an uncanny build. We know what we're going to use if they're
mhm.
throwing Black Order in there on defense or something as a filler. That's not a question. And now we know what to do about Gamma, whether they're in room 5 or 6 or anywhere. So it becomes this race to find that trick team that somebody makes a mistake on and you don't make a mistake into their defense, and that gives you the win in just the 1 or 2 rooms. And so for you, what in your defense is what is stopping them? What's holding them up? What's tripping them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I've been kind of, I would say I'm about 70% offense, 30% defense. So I have Darkhold with Kingpin in room one. I have Gamma in room six, and then in rooms 2 through 5, I generally kind of like try to mix things up, and I'm trying to find something like you're saying that works.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, it does. But I get a trip up on Gamma all the time. It's usually a 2 tap, and that gives me that one window I need to, be more efficient. It's where I struggle is like my offensive comp sometimes just doesn't match up well to the defense I'm facing. It's like every 1 in 5, like there's that one kryptonite. I'm like, oh crap, this is going to be
Right.
a long fight. And I just accept that. That's going to happen, right? But I'm trying some combinations. Like I'm trying Spider Noir as a raider with the X Factor team. Um, and the reason I'm doing that is because I know Noir is going first. And if I can
Mm-hmm.
get a crit, it might start the speed up process. Um, he's a little faster than Zemo even. So, but so far it's not really shaking out. I'm gonna have to tweak something there. But
Right.
and that's where I think is really interesting about like what you've done to the game and the community, right? Your defense up videos really brought the idea of theory crafting to the table, in my opinion, right? Like I think you helped start that conversation of like, what can we build with the roster and using the best things we can to get the best outcome we can, and that transfers over to Cosmic Crucible in the same regard.
Yeah, Cosmic Crucible is just 3D chess compared to what War was.
Mm-hmm.
War is so easy for me. When we make those defense up videos for War, we don't go over those behind the scenes or anything. That I can look at those off the cuff and just throw them out there. It's like, placement ISOs, here you go.
Right.
But when it comes to this Cosmic Crucible with the meta changing from from one match to the next, really. Like, people are switching up their defenses between trial 1 and trial 2 because they're trying to get a better result. They're trying to be more efficient with their offense, something tricky with their defense. And so you really have to be on your toes because we're constantly finding different things, different variations of certain builds and stuff. And that's why I have a brain trust of people that come in with me, and we discuss all this and we throw out ideas, and we try to point to people and say, hey, look, this is suggestions. These are ideas. This is something for you to think about and work off of. But it's a lot more complex because every room reacts. I mean, the difference between putting gamma in 5 and 6 is just absurd.
No, absolutely. And I'm starting to see I saw an interesting combination the other day with like Jubilee, Omega Red. I can't remember the comp. I'd have to look for it, but I'll have to send that to you. But it was really tough. And it was a challenge. Oh my God. We just mobile gamer raid for 159. Jeez. I appreciate the raid, sir. What's going on, Raiders? So we're here with Run 7 for episode 4 of Cosmic Crucible Live, where we're just talking about, basic things here around Cosmic Crucible, theory crafting, some of the challenges we're here. Run 7's one of the best people I could ever, and I'm going to explain at the end why it's such a big deal for me to have Run 7. So please hang around while you can. So,
I'm kind of curious about that myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So Run, tell me a little bit about like what's tripped you up? Like, what is the one defense that you said, oh shit?
Okay. So I hate to admit to this, but I put off unlocking Dormammu and building Dormammu for a very long time. And so I fight dorm hold and dorm compositions in Arena all the time, but I always did it without a Dormammu. And I did it with, a variety of those meta tunes all mixed together, Red Hulk and Rogue and MLF and stuff like that. And so it wasn't such a big deal to beat them in Arena, but when you go into Cosmic Crucible and I need my whole Unlimited team and I need my whole Gamma team and I have to beat Dorm Hold or any kind of a Dorm comp with other stuff, I failed miserably. I had to rely on my brain trust of people to show me how these things are doing. I'd go in and talk to chat and ask them, how do I do? Like, it should be pretty simple because everybody else raced to get Dormammu, but I just wasn't interested in the character. And so now I'm struggling with the Dormammu builds. Of course, with the Age of X, they're clearing the revives. You've got Red Hulk who can go in there and do stuff. I've got Red Hulk on defense, of course, but you've got things that kind of neuter Dormammu this turn, and I'm kind of glad for that. But that's where I'm getting held up is the Dormammu build, specifically Dormhold, just because I'm not used to having to go into that, like two-tapping it with Zemo and coming back in with Weapon X, or kind of some of the other traditional things that people did in war and stuff like that. It's all new territory for me, which is weird because those aren't the cutting-edge metas. Those are yesterday's metas, but that's what holds me up. The other thing that got me was the Kingpin with the Tangled Web. I wasn't prepared for how that played out. I think that's about it. Every once in a while, that Dark Hunters, not so much this turn with Age of X, but before the Dark Hunter team, I was impressed with how fast they were out of the gates. I wasn't prepared for that. So I actually threw them in on defense. And so far, it hasn't done anything amazing except pull down bigger teams than I expected. People see it and what I'm doing with it because I've got a little bit of a trick with it. And people see that and they're like, I don't know how that's going to play. And they just smash it with something big. And so I haven't really seen any good results with it.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point too. And it's interesting because I know you mentioned War Dogs earlier. Like, right now you don't have the resources to really invest in them at this point, but do you think they're going to make that big of an impact in Crucible compared to the OG Wakandans? And, or what's your brain trust saying? I know a few guys in your brain trust, like Pathfinder, Zero, and others. Like, what are you hearing specifically around, like, I wanted to test them yesterday, but I needed to do something different. So I ended up not being able to test it. I was actually going to use it against Darkhold to see how they perform, but I ended up having to scrap it.
Their speed out of the gates is phenomenal. Their upfront damage is just crazy. I can't wait to see what happens when Nakia gets in there with them. I think they're going to be very effective in Crucible and War. I think specifically the War Dogs, like, I was so happy when I pulled 7 red stars and they reworked the Wakandans for Crucible. I was like, sweet, my M'Baku with 7 red stars. He finally matters. And then he's benched now. It doesn't matter how many red stars I've got on M'Baku. He's not going to be good as BC or as Nakia. And so I wish I could build those two, but again, I'm on the path to apocalypse, and that means I got to stay the course and do the boring stuff without spending. That's kind of what I'm relegated to. So
We got a question in chat like, why would you use Darkhold on defense? That's coming from Windstorm.
why would you use Darkhold on defense? I see a lot of people using Darkhold on defense actually at a variety. That's the thing with Crucible.
Yeah.
You got to understand there is a variety of layers to it depending on where you're playing, whether you're down in Wood League or you're up in Masters. People are using different tactics and have different things available to them. They have wider rosters or more narrow rosters. You've got some people in Masters who don't spend a lot of money or are even free to play, and they have the narrowest of rosters, and it's amazing what they put together. And yet you've got some fat lazy spenders, down there in like gold or something, and they have these huge wide rosters, but they don't really care to play competitively. They're just in there for the points or whatever. And you find the weirdest, like they'll have these super stacked defenses, and yet they still lose because they're not doing offensively very well.
Yeah, I remember I did come across a couple, like, some of the diamond like war alliances, like it would have like turtle defenses because they didn't care as much about Crucible. And then going up against them in like Plat 1 at the time was like, oh my God, it was insane. But yeah, I think it's more for like, it just depends on what you have. I mean, I agree. Like what works for me may not work for you, and that's okay. So if you don't think Darkhold belongs in defense, that's your prerogative and you're happy to do that. And if it helps your offense efficiency, awesome. Like that's a win, but I think there's a lot of opinions on what people do, but you just got to kind of look at your own roster and determine what makes the most sense for what you can do.
And you got to remember, sometimes people just enjoy building a character. You see those people who build out the AIM team because they're hoping for MODOK to come through.
Yes.
Or you see who made a Tony Stark before Tony Stark was anything to get excited about just because they like Iron Man. And you'll see that being used. And that's cool. They're enjoying the game. And if you're enjoying the game, you're playing it the right way.
Yeah, and that brings up another point, right? Because I think this is something I wanted to talk to you about is what do we think oh, something says my camera is glitching. No, sorry, Zombie Iron Man. That's where it's coming from.
It's a flicker. You're too powerful for your camera. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's all it is. It'll be fine. We'll just let it be. But talking about these one game mode teams, okay, and I want to kind of curtail that from that conversation into these 3-person release teams, or these duo release teams, and what we really think about it big picture. But let's start off with talking about these one game mode teams like Web Warriors. Like I think we're finding at this point they're only really good in raids at this point. They've just lost all their value. Don't use them really anywhere. They're just a power grab in war. They don't do anything in Crucible at this point. Do we
I
like
came across
that?
one in war today that really upset me because I didn't notice that they stuck Spider Weaver in there, I went in with my Bionic Avengers, and of course Viv got targeted. And she got shut down, and that was it. If it gets shut down on that Bionic comp, then you're screwed. And you can still beat the Web Warriors with Weaver as long as Vivian doesn't get shut down. And so that pissed me off because I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, the Bionic, the Web Warriors is, I don't know what they were thinking with that.
I mean, do you like that they're doing that, releasing teams that are specifically good for a single game mode, or do you like the idea of just being able to theory craft your own roster, which I think I know the answer.
Well, the problem is if you build teams that are designed to just be used wherever you want them, and there's nothing in their kits that says they're specific for war or war defense or Crucible or whatever, you end up with a situation that we had way back in the beginning, which was Fury and his minions. They came out, they beat everything, they were good everywhere. You didn't need to build anything else. So you had this 5-man team that crushed it all over the place. And so they have to avoid that by putting things in the kits that make them more powerful here or basically less powerful everywhere else is what they're trying for. And that's a good thing for the health of the game because it forces us into building a variety. It forces us into coming up with different ideas. That's another reason for these rooms having room bonuses that change up all the time. Right now, people are investing in mutants because, you know, we just had our rogue and friends, the mutant team there, and they work incredibly well in Crucible right now because they're a Crucible team and they have all these bonuses with the Age of X. So people are dumping resources into them. But which was frustrating to me, they changed it, and Wakandans no longer, I don't use them on offense or defense right now. They can be used on offense or defense, but they don't shine right now because of the Age of X room bonus, which will go away. It'll come back in favor of something else. So Scopely's always trying to mix it up and force us to buy and use our resources in a variety of different ways. And that's why they have these 3-man and 4-man teams, so that we get the cool new toy like Zim and Hela, and then we can come up with stuff to put with them and make them do other things. And then later on down the road, if they need to bring in a character because they need, I don't know, they need a quick cash grab or something, they'll just bring in zombie Scarlet Witch and throw her on that team. And they'll make a ton of money because people go for it. And so they don't like doing the 5-piece cookie cutter teams. But at the same time, they don't want to have all powerful builds either. So they're getting into quite a juggling act.
Yeah, and it seemed like maybe they learned a hard lesson with the Eternals release, you know, and I think that kind of set a different path for them, because I definitely see a difference since that happened. You know, looking at full release teams versus the, you know, the 3-man, 2-man, do you still like that better, or would you rather just them do the full release of a full team?
I definitely like the 2, 3, and 4-man teams.
Yep.
Because I can still invest in X Factor, and there's this little part of my brain that says it's okay, there'll be a 5th. You know, Medusa's coming, don't worry about it. You could invest in your Inhumans still or something, and it gives me hope. Now, what surprisingly has been happening is they haven't been actually just like they didn't pull somebody off of the Inhumans and then add in Medusa. They'll probably end up breaking up that team completely. That's what they seem to be doing now. They took our power armor and completely broke it up, and you know, you've got your Bionic Avengers and probably West Coast Avengers or something for in the future. And I was surprised that they don't just build, you know, add in a 5th, since they have these teams set to go. Our Supernatural got broken up into Dark Hunters and other stuff. So it's kind of weird what they're doing, but I guess that's okay. I like the mix up. I like that they constantly keep us on our toes and we don't know what exactly to build. And regardless of how many videos Tana puts out, we never really know what's around the corner.
It's interesting because, like, I agree. We always wait for the 5th character. It never ever happens. But I think in general, the reworks are great for the game. You know, I just wish they wouldn't do it stacked up behind each other so quickly. It's just impossible to keep up. I feel like the pace has really picked up, you know, especially this year, like with the amount of characters being dumped at us, and the heavier requirements have definitely been a stress to the community. Whether you're positive or negative for it, you know, it's a lot. I mean, it's like it feels like it's designed to drain the resource because they know people are hoarding. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the same concept, but it's
I'm waiting for them to take away the mailbox. I think that they should actually, and I know it's not going to be very popular, but I'm waiting for them to take away the mailbox so that when you earn something on the web store or you earn something in game, it just immediately goes into your account and you aren't given the choice to hoard it in your mailbox. Because I'm pretty sure they were not intending for that in-game mail to be anything like this, like what we're doing with it now. And it's a problem for them because it becomes one more aspect of the game that is less in their control. I mean, they want complete control to place us where they want us, when they want us, so that they can drop that offer exactly at the right time and know that the most amount of people are going to be going for it.
And I'm sure they have an algorithm that predicts that too. They have all the information. I think a lot of the community does, like, give them a hard time for the bugs and the glitches, but their business team knows what they're doing, I feel like, at the end of the day.
Well, you know, to speak on that, I think that they've learned a lot of lessons ever since COVID.
Hmm.
Okay, so COVID hit and the Black Order came out. It was a 5-piece cookie cutter team, as cookie cutter as it gets. You cannot break that team up. It's that 5. The only thing that isn't 5 is when you filter for Black Order and it leaves Thanos off. It drives me nuts.
Yeah,
I know Black Order means the people around the king, but whatever. Anyway, so they built this team that's really good, a 5-piece team, and it dominates
Mhm.
everywhere. And then COVID hits and they can't do anything about it. And we all start investing in the Black Order for a year,
Yep.
right? Everybody's, what else are you going to invest in? It's the best team in the game. It's the 5-piece. So you just keep building into it. And then they get back to work and they're like, well, how do we beat this? And so they come in with a super team, which I believe was the Infinity Watch, was kind of their counter to it. And then they're like, well, this team is kind of too OP, so how do we beat that? And then they're like, well, let's try and bring it down and we'll just put it into 2 characters. And they come across with Icarus and Cersei, which are ridiculously overpowered, but at least it's a 2-piece and not a 5-piece
Right.
team. And then they say, well, we can't keep just building these overpowered characters. We've got to figure it out. And so they bring in Agatha, and just specifically in her kit, it says "Fu Eternals." And so they're getting a little bit better at trying to cover their mistakes and balance out the game as it goes, trying to kind of nerf things that were a little too much. And
Mhm.
sometimes they overdo it. Like, nobody gets to use Sinister anymore, man. That he was a fun character, and they
Yeah.
just nerfed him to the end of the world.
Reworked them,
So
then nerfed them. You know, it's just kind of it's funny too. It's like even the Undying team. I know when like I mean we won't talk about like the negative stuff around Undying's release and Zim and all that. Like that's not for this conversation. But you know, I think the initial impressions were like this team is way too broken. But surprisingly, the team is actually fairly balanced because
well,
you could take Axeman in there and destroy it, you know, regardless of the build, which is I think is a
you
good thing.
can't use them on defense. I mean, you can if you want to,
Hmm.
but you're not going to get the value out of them. They are a war offense team. They absolutely dominate in war, and they give, because the release method eventually allowed everybody access to Zombie Iron Man, and he works at 2 stars, you know, gear tier 12, 2 stars,
Yes.
no reds, and he's doing just fine. It allows everybody to get into war and crush those huge, those huge defenses. And it's mixing things up, and it's allowing some of those really big alliances. And I talked to some of those big alliance members, and they're like, you know what? It's allowing us to mix it up at the top a little bit more. It's not just a smash fest for the top 2
Right.
alliances in the game now, because you have this tool that can carve up just about anything you want. But you don't get to use them on defense. If you do, it's gonna get wrecked because because the AI sucks at targeting, but humans don't. They're smart enough to get the speed off of the Gregs or Tony or whatever. And so they designed it where it works really well where they wanted it to work, and it's mixing things up in war, and it's not ruining the rest of the game. You can still use them elsewhere, but they're not nearly as powerful as they are in war.
No, I agree completely. We got a comment here that said Zim has totally undone my YA investment. What I would tell you is put him on offense and your investment's right back where you started.
Why are you using YA on defense anymore? Everybody's using YA on offense now because their YA is so good at doing so many different things.
Yeah.
Their sustainability. YA is I that was a team that I initially wanted to not skip, but do a very low investment in. And just over the past, I don't know, well, since their release, they have just continually surprised me at how good they get. And we're seeing some slight changes in their ISOs, putting Skirmisher on Kate Bishop to keep up with this resistance meta.
Hmm.
People are debating whether Squirrel Girl should be healer or striker, and depends on where you use her, things like that. And the team just taking hits and then spamming that heal button on Squirrel Girl, gaining so much energy with the things that they do, it allows you to do a lot of stuff with them.
Yeah, and even in their value outside of war. I mean, they're a war defense team, but like in Crucible, they're awesome. Like they give you multiple options to like approach different defenses. Like they're a good team to use, you know. And I think
Mm-hmm.
and Squirrel Girl is an excellent plug and play character. I mean, great DD5 option if you haven't, if you're still trying to build for that. Like Squirrel Girl was awesome in DD5.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you end up bringing for City? Did you use Squirrel Girl or did you use somebody else?
For City, oh, City was another one of those mistakes. So I got real excited over Spider Woman because I read her kit and I heard about her stats and I was like, oh, she's super fast and she's got this ability block and she cleanses and she chains all over the place and high damage, and I was really excited. And I'm not trashing her. She's a great character, but she's not what I thought she would be. And so I brought her up and I brought up the, let's see, I got 3 Web Warriors, Spider Woman, and then I brought in Cloak. Cloak was my 5th, and of course, Cloak without Dagger is not nearly as exciting.
Yeah.
He's useful, but not great. And the thing was, is that I refused to build Shang-Chi. I hated Heroes for Hire. I hated Shang-Chi. I thought he looked stupid with his original costume. I wasn't, I was just kind of pissed about the whole release method. You know, when I saw Cerebro realize that he healed on his special during that video. And it was I was so embarrassed that I play a game built by people who are so incompetent sometimes, not the devs so much as the people who are pushing this out, releasing this stuff without testing it properly and everything. It was such a frustration to me. I couldn't bring myself to build Shang-Chi. And then when I finally did, people were just like, dude, you just got to build Shang-Chi. Don't build the rest of the Heroes for Hire. Just build Shang-Chi. You're going to love him in raids. You're going to love him all over the place. I put him in there in City, and he just absolutely dominated. Of course, he's virtually necessary in Doom, in the Doom raids. I don't know. I mean, I was trying to get through there with Zemo in his place and stuff like that, and it just wasn't working. And I got Shang-Chi, and I hit his ult for the first time and watched half the screen get deleted, and I was like, okay, I'm a believer. it was like, yeah, okay.
I hope he stays good for a long time. I'm with you. I'm over. I hated Heroes for Hire. I think everyone hates Heroes for Hire. But
Right.
wait. Well, let's pivot to this, right? So, like, looking at like surprise teams, because I think you call that a lot of this kind of like indirectly, right? Like teams that are like hybrids that no one expects. What's a team that surprises you this season in Cosmic Cruise?
Well, I've got one in War that's surprising me. I'm hearing about it from a lot of people. Benny Westside brought it to my attention, but
Mhm.
a lot of people are taking Shang-Chi off of the Heroes for Hire. And then what do you do with the pieces? Well, you throw Daredevil on that team. And surprisingly, it still gets wins because people see that Shang-Chi is missing and they underestimate it. And it's still the 4-piece Heroes for Hire, and they're getting victories in War with it. So that's something that's interesting. The one in Crucible that I didn't expect to be as powerful as it is, and so I'm running it now, is the standard Uncanny with Magic.
Yes.
Especially now that Magic is farmable and you can get her built up near or as big as your Phoenix. The the one that's really crazy is when they have this a really small, like a gear tier 12 Phoenix and a gear tier 15 Magic, and the Phoenix dies real early like she's supposed to. And then the second one comes in and is even worse. And that team in Age of X with those bonuses, it's just catching people off guard. They didn't realize how good the bonuses are for that team.
Yeah, I think I've seen things where Storm hits over a couple million, 2 million, or something crazy like that. Especially if you have the
Yep.
T4, you get her like the full 20 charges.
Right. Right. And you can do stuff like throw a Red Guardian or a Drax in there,
Mhm.
so it makes it tough to control that team when they go into it. I think I've got a 500 and like a 600 uncanny with Colossus. It's like 600, I think. And that's nothing at Diamond. That's nothing. And I every once in a while will get a defensive victory with it, and it always surprises me.
Yeah. So you're using it strictly on defense, not on offense.
Yeah, you can use a hybrid comp against the Asgardians in Crucible. I believe it's Uncanny Magic, and you replace Colossus with Beast. And you use the Beast basic into the Asgardians, especially if they clump the 3 powerhouses
Mhm.
in the same grouping. And so that's I always tell them, don't put Mighty Thor and Valkyrie in a 3-piece, because you can use that in Crucible. Beast will flip their defense up into defense down, and then Storm will nuke them, and you just wombo combo the hell out of them with defense down. And what happens is you nuke the whole team and they all die at once, or mostly die at once, so that if there is somebody standing, it's just cleanup. And yeah, they'll get the Valkyrie bonuses sometimes, but it's not a big deal.
It's interesting. I mean, like I was gonna say probably the same thing. I think Uncanny has been the biggest surprise for me. Just how well they just destroy Gamma in Room 5. Like in Room 6, it doesn't work as well. I mean, it can. It's not saying it would never work, but it's just so much harder to set up
Mhm.
because of the RNG factor. But I mean, in Room 5, it just big punch ups, 200, almost 250, 300K punch ups with that team. That was just blew my mind. I had asked Talk about this. Is like, have you ever used some of the other older mutants, like X-23 in any comps or Negasonic? Just knowing how she can hit pretty hard on that first opening ult. Have you thought about any of those, or have seen any of those comps yet that have surprised you?
So you bring up Negasonic and X-23, both really good characters. You can put those on some fast teams. You can throw them in with Dad Bros. Negasonic is a raider trying to get crits on the opening move. X-23, if you can knock somebody low with a fast opening team, she gets that speed, has the ability block, can throw in some RNG. They're not terrible characters by any means. They're hard hitting. They can be fast. It's just a matter of getting them with the people that helps them the most. And of course, once again, with Age of X, you've got Hero Mutant, and that allows them to do way more than they would normally be able to do. So if you are going to try using characters like that, now's the time to do it.
But only if you have them built up. Don't build them up if you haven't.
Yeah, definitely not worth building. I I like to try and direct people to sticking to the apocalypse path if you're an old enough player that you're going to get to apocalypse and you're going to get everything and you have the correct stuff already unlocked, stay that course. Everything else is kind of a trap. They love putting things out there for us to waste our gear on and things like that. So try and stick to it. But if that's not for you, then I've got tons of options for you to waste your resources on. Not waste, but have fun with your resources, I should say.
No, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's you got to play the game the way you want to play it, and
Mm-hmm.
you can. People will tell you to do all kinds of different things, but it's at the end of the day, you got to make your own choices on what works for you and how you want to play.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, Rubber Toe, Mr. Negative is a full trap. I agree with you, but that Underworld team looks like a whole lot of fun, man. I wish I could have afforded to build them. And I have a 7 red Taskmaster that I would
ooh,
love to be smashing nerds with, but I don't have the opportunity to do that.
they are a lot of fun. I mean, I do have it built. I did go down the rabbit hole of getting Mr. Negative, and the outcome from the team has been awesome. I mean, they're not great outside of war though. Like just they're strictly again one of those war offense
Right.
teams. They're too slow outside of war. Now you're better off breaking the team apart and using a hybrid comp than you are using the full team.
Hmm.
For anyone interested in Mr. Negative's impact outside of war offense.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't speak to Mr. Negative, but you can use Taskmaster on a lot of stuff. He's good with that Tangled Web hybrids in there,
mhm.
throwing in the extra blinds because if they miss because of a blind, it doesn't take away the charge off of Weaver, so you can really get some extension out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my initial comp before I decided to pull Tangle Web. I was using Kingpin, Taskmaster, and I believe I was using um I think I was using Goblin at the time, but then I pulled Goblin for negative once I got him up.
Hmm.
Um just to throw in that extra like ability block trauma just for some extra RNG, and he has the extra summons he can do. That. Um as far as like rooms you want to see, and we'll get towards the end part of this here. Um if they change the rooms and you get rid of Age of X, like what would you like to see? Like where does your brain go? As like, oh man, that would be the coolest thing if they did that.
I want to see, instead of we have Age of X from 1 to 6, I don't want to see that anymore. I don't, you've got the Defender's Advantage, which is the 10 or 20%, 20% characters gain 20% health and 10% damage, right? Defending characters.
Yep.
That's fine. I don't want to see this Age of X nonsense across 1 through 6. I want to see Age of X in room 2, and then I want to see something about Mystics in 3, and I want to see something about Bio in 4, and I want to see something about maybe City in another one. And I want to see them mix every single thing up and then only have a few that are overlapping in a couple of different ways. That way we get much more variety with our rosters. And I know if you have it very individualized, then it's like, okay, you've got your choice of these 3 teams for this room. And I don't want that. I don't want
Yes.
that. So I do want some overlap. So I don't want it to just be the origins, but I want it to, mix it up a little bit. It's just everything's about hero mutants right now.
No, I
And
agree
that's
with
kind of boring to me.
I agree with that. Like my opinion is like, do we expand it to go to 8 rooms, or do we keep 6 and drop the 1 and 2 and change those into more gimmick rooms?
I think 6 is fine for right now. The only reason they raised it to 10 rooms in War is because we had enough teams that made sense. I'm a little frustrated that in War we now show 4 rooms instead of just the first 2. I liked that fog of war where you don't know what's coming up next. It added some strategy to it.
Yeah, and it's really funny you say that, because like somebody brought up yesterday after when we did our Crucible round 1, somebody brought up like having fog of war in Cosmic Crucible, where you can only see one room at a time and you got to kind of go left or right. I think that would be a really interesting dynamic to add to the game. I think it would be a lot of fun that way, because you have no idea what to expect.
I think that would be good for some things, but bad for others. We have this where each room is dynamically different. Well, not with Age of X, but we have some different stuff, between Latent Power, Tales of Legends, and things like that. So if you had that fog of war where it covered up the last rooms, you'd kind of know what's going to be in room 6 anyways. You have a pretty good idea. And I don't think it would be as beneficial. It works well in War where every room has the same bonus. I don't think it would work as well in Crucible with the different kind of rooms, unless they did something crazy, like just randomly black out 2 rooms until you clear the other 4. And they would be random, and you'd never know which one was blacked out. Every time you could get a great roll on RNG and you'd see their biggest teams right there. And I don't know, something like that maybe, but I'm okay with the way it is. I'm okay with no fog of war here. I'm okay with the all-encompassing room bonuses, so long as that's not going to be every single time. It was cool this time with Age of X, but I'm over it.
It is interesting. I mean, Quick the Messiah, his first-time chatter, is saying, we've been doing the same first 4 teams in War to kind of add that fog back. That's an interesting thought. I never even.
I always tell people in the defense up videos, put your best stuff at the back so they don't know what's happening. If you're going to be running Darkhold with Dormammu back there and slowing people down in War, or whatever your big team is, whether you want to use Zim in there or something, I don't know. Put them in the back. That way, as they go down through your helicarrier, they don't know where to assign players if they're being very specific, if they're being very competitive. But for like me and my alliance, we don't care. We strip out our defense and just let it ride. That way we have more offensive options. So when you have an event going on like what we have right now, where it's war attacks, you can just go smash away at the flight decks and get your points and go.
Yeah, 100%. So Run, I wanted to kind of end it off this way. Like the reason why it's such a big deal that you're on the show today is like, what I know a lot of people don't know is like, I started streaming about 3 months ago. I'd say maybe a little more than that now. I think we're getting closer to 4 or 5, but
yeah, you gotta be at 4 or 5.
Yeah,
I've been watching you for a minute.
Yeah, 4 or 5. And the reason why I started streaming is because of you, man. I really wanted to at least, like, now to have you face to face to say is like, I was watching one of your streams. I've been playing the game for a little while, and I follow everybody. I've watched stuff. I'm generally the ultimate lurker, but I always watch, and I watch your content. And it was a stream you did where you were saying like, we need more people streaming the game, and that was kind of like, I've streamed other games in the past, and I feel like I've got a good handle on this game for the most part. Like I'm always more I can learn, but you're kind of the inspiration for me to start streaming, and I wanted to at least say thank you. And
well, you're welcome, and thank you for streaming. I think it's great when we have more and more people in here. I made a joke in stream yesterday about we see the QR codes in those streamers who are paid to show up here and do some promotional stuff. Don't make fun of those guys. Try and get them interested in the game. If they start getting a taste of this community like I got, they're going to stick around and they're going to be a part of it, and they're going to they're going to grow our community that much bigger, because if other people come in here, they're just going to be bringing more people to the game. It's more players, more people to commune with and have a good time with. So there's no pie to fight over. So it's not like you're going to be stealing somebody else's viewership or anything like that. Everybody's got their favorite streamer. Everybody's got different ones they hope to raid into or whatever. But when it all push comes to shove, it's just if you show who you are as a streamer, people will come to you and you will bring people to this game and people will enjoy it. Whether you're informative, whether you're entertaining, or whether you're provocative, whatever your angle is, there's viewers out there who want to watch you. There's 7 billion people on this planet. Bring them to Marvel Strike Force because Scopely isn't going to.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. It's like I think we hear about all the things of people quitting the game, and then you have guys out here trying to actively promote the game. So like let's not shoot our own selves in the foot with that as a community for sure. So Ron, once again, thank you so much for joining Cosmic Crucible Live. Where can we find you? Where for anyone that is not familiar with you, which I'm sure everyone knows who you are, but for ones that may not, where can they find you?
Well, unfortunately, I couldn't get the Grinder account to work, but you can find me on YouTube. You can find me right here at Twitch. That's pretty much it. I have other stuff out there, but it's not, I don't really produce a lot of content for it. It's mostly YouTube and Twitch. But you can find me on my Discord too. Come hang out, chat with us in Discord.
Absolutely. So I'll make sure for anyone watching the video here, I'll make sure I drop his information, both his Discord, his YouTube, and his Twitch. You guys can go check out Run 7. But thank you guys so much. Once again, thank you to the legendary Run 7.
Thanks, Reaper. Appreciate it.